G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today of course we are here to talk more trade rumours. It just keeps on coming out, these sort of rumours from a lot of players. I think I said in the podcast last week that at this point teams need to start locking up their players because it seems that most players are just leaving. It doesn't matter if you're the captain of the club or someone who's only played a couple of AFL games. Everyone is on the market, it does seem. However, what I wanted to bring up first of all is there is some trade news regarding teams in the bottom 6 to 8 clubs and some sort of handout, or the AFL are planning on introducing bonuses for free agents who join clubs in the bottom 4 to bottom 6, according to Cal Toomey from Gettable. And the more I think about this, the more I think it's actually a decent idea. We've seen that so many players from bottom clubs start moving to top clubs through free agency, and of course Oscar Allen being the big one, moving from one of the bottom clubs in the competition, now going to Brisbane, who are in the grand final. So obviously not really fair for the bottom clubs free agency. So I really do like that there is an idea of adding bonuses, and the AFL are starting to consider a lot more about the bottom clubs when it comes to the off season, not just for draft but for players in the now as well. I think it's a really good idea. We'll have to see how that plays out, but maybe in the next year or so this will occur in the AFL space. But let's get to, first of all, the requests that have been made over the last week or so. Now, I am recording this on Sunday, so I may have missed a couple that come out throughout the Monday afternoon and the morning. There may be a few Collingwood players that request moves and Hawthorn players, depending on their exit meetings. We just have to wait and see. But first of all, we've got the Gold Coast in Malcolm Roses has asked to be traded away from the Suns. The Tigers and the Swans are keen on him. Hasn't decided on a club as of yet though. Sam Draper has finally decided which club he wants to go to, which is the Brisbane Lions, so another great sign for them. Sam Flanders has requested a trade away from the Gold Coast as well. Hasn't decided on a team as of yet, but Carlton, St Kilda, Essendon and Melbourne have all been keen on him. But now let's get to the rumours, and the first one, which was pretty surprising out of nowhere in some extent, is Christian Petrarca. So Tom Morris came out and said that it's very delicately poised and cautionally things are beginning to move in the Christian Petrarca camp. Both parties would be open to a trade, but neither really wants to say that they are demanding a move. Petrarca is not as adamant as he was in 2024, and the Demons still see him as a highly valued player, but definitely one to watch. And it has come out in recent news that he is more than happy to leave outside of Victoria, and clubs that he is also considering are Adelaide, the Gold Coast Suns and the Sydney Swans. Now, as a Swans fan, I actually would really like this idea for Sydney. I think it would really help out the likes of Warner and Heaney, that they could play more forward, or they could vice versa. Petrarca could play forward for the Swans and add some really great quality up there. I don't really know where this one sits. I would be very surprised to see him outside of Victoria, if I'm being honest. Just that kind of stunned me, that sort of news. Not so much on the trade stuff. We've heard him not being too happy with Melbourne the last couple of years, and it seems now with Stephen King there could be a bit of a refresher at the club. But to hear that he could be leaving to South Australia, to Queensland or New South Wales really surprises me. Now, it does seem, of course, that all the clubs that he wants to go to are around the teams that are contending for the top 8 you would expect next year. Of course, the Crows finished on top, which was really good to see, but did bow out in finals pretty quickly. So the Crows definitely need some more improvement, and we'll get to Zach Merritt in a moment, but he seems at this point that he just wants to go to Hawthorn. So maybe they'll definitely keep their eye on Christian Petrarca. Now, speaking of the Crows targets, Cal Archie seems at this stage, according to Cal Toomey on Gettable, that he is set to request a trade at the end of the Brisbane Lions season. So keep your eye on that one, Crows fans. I think they do need some more help up forward, especially when Isaac Rankin went out with the suspension this year. Showed they really lacked some quality up forward with smalls or medium types. So I think that Cal Archie would be a great inclusion. And sticking with the Lions, it seems that the Eagles are offering a massive deal for Brendan Starskovic. It seems that they're willing to give a 4-year deal at $900K, according to Paddy Sweeney in 9 News. Now, that is a massive deal for a small defender, you would have to say, or a guy who is matched up on the best small forwards in the game. Maybe we should be valuing these players a lot better, because some of the small forwards in the games obviously rip, especially finals, apart. Now, he didn't have a great game against Collingwood last week. Jamie Elliott did kick 4 goals, so I don't know if that hampers it a little bit, but West Coast probably see him as a potential next captain, but definitely a big leader of the West Coast if he was to leave. I've still always thought that Brendan Starskovic will re-sign, but to hear a 4-year deal at $900K, that's going to be definitely hard to pass up. So I think that one just will have to wait until probably the next couple of weeks. Now let's get to the big story, of course. It's been around the trade rumours for, the last month or so now, which is Zach Merritt. Merritt. Now, the Adelaide Crows have joined the conversation for Zach Merritt, according to Caroline Wilson over the last week or so. However, he, as I mentioned a moment ago, Merritt wants to go to Hawthorn if he's leaving Essendon. So I think that at this point, I think that he has to go. I can't see a way where he stays at Essendon next year, especially he can't be captain. That's not going to happen. I really can't see a way where Zach Merritt stays at the club at this point. It seems like that bridge is almost burned. I'll be very interested to see if he goes to Brownlow night and if he goes to sit on the Essendon table. There's still some conjecture on if he will be at the Essendon Best and Fairest. It seems at this point that he's going to be joining Hawthorn. That's just my belief. I'd be very surprised if he's an Essendon jumper next year. After that, we move to Charlie Curnow. Now, first of all, I want to play what Damien Barrett had to say regarding Charlie Curnow's decision in this upcoming trade period.
As you've watched this space, the whole Curnow situation, clearly...
What do you think happens, Damo?
I think he leaves Carlton.
You think he goes?
I think he leaves Carlton.
Wow.
I feel the Swans are the team that are right now in front, but we know it's not over until October 15, 7:30pm, deadline. That's about the time we'll probably hear the result.
That's a big story. I've never heard someone confidently say he'd go.
Because I don't think they will give up one of their big four. So I don't see how the Swans could do it if they're not willing to part with those four players.
They can't go into another year without a proper forward. Now, whether Curnow's the right answer for that club, I don't know. But they've tried it. They've got to a grand final with those three. I know they were a bit banged up in that grand final on that day when they failed in 2024, but they didn't get near it this year without them.
He sat at this desk the best part of 4 months ago and for the first time raised Charlie Curnow. So if he's saying that...
Blakey, Heaney, Warner, Goulden. It's got to be one of them.
It won't be Warner.
Blakey, Heaney, Warner, Goulden.
I'm not sure who else for Charlie.
Well, they're not going to give up Heaney, Warner or Goulden.
No.
So unless it's Blakey and something, I can't see it getting done.
So it's very interesting to see that he does say that the Swans are in front of the race. This was a little bit earlier in the week. I think it was Monday last week on Footy Classified. But it does seem as well the Gold Coast are all but confirmed to be in the race for Charlie Curnow, but they will not trade Ethan Reid or Jed Walter to get that player. Now, we did talk a moment ago about Sam Flanders requesting a trade. Carlton are in the mix, so I think that would be a decent something to add on. Obviously, Charlie Curnow is worth a lot more than Sam Flanders, but if they could add that into a trade, that would be really good for the Blues. And they have made it pretty adamant, Carlton, that they don't want picks. They want players. They want ready-made top-line players to come to the club for Charlie Curnow. Now, it does seem Charlie Curnow's ideal destination is Geelong, followed by the Gold Coast and then Sydney. This is according to Damien Barrett a few days after he said that the Swans are in front, so that's a bit interesting. And in some amazing news that came out of nowhere from Xander Maguire, that Collingwood have launched an audacious bid for Charlie Curnow in 2026. Now, of course, I think Collingwood have been crying out for a key forward, and Charlie Curnow, of course, would be one of the best of them. I just can't see a way where Collingwood can trade players for Charlie Curnow at this moment in time because they don't want picks and Collingwood don't have any picks. So I really can't see a way where Collingwood get this one done. Maybe they get Dan Houston to just go to Carlton. We'll take him. That may be the way they go, but I really can't see how Collingwood can do it. Right now, if I had to make a guess, I did say it last week. I thought the Gold Coast would be able to get him. I would like to get him as a Swans fan, but also don't want to give up a huge amount for him, especially with what some people are saying with the Swans giving up a Warner, a Heaney, a Golden, or a Blakey. I don't want to do any of that, or a Tom Papley. I don't think that's the right move because that's not the right move in my eyes. But we'll just have to wait and see how that one plays out. I've always thought that he'd go to the Gold Coast. I can't see a way where Geelong get it done. I really don't know why they would do it with Shannon Neal in the team and how much he's flourished this year, along with obviously Jersey Cameron, who is still winding back the clock at this point. So interesting one to watch for Charlie Curnow. Now, sticking with a couple of Swans players that could be on the outer. First of all, Robbie Fox was recently delisted from Sydney, and it does seem that the Giants are exploring an option to try and get him, as of course he would be a delisted free agent if they were to pick him up, or a potential rookie. There has also been links about the fact that Robbie Fox could be an inaugural player for the Tassie Devils in the VFL next year. Of course, a Tasmanian, so could be playing for them, maybe potentially as a captain. Now, Jack Buller, another Swans player, has been linked to Collingwood for the last couple of weeks, and it does seem now that he hasn't officially requested a trade, but it is pretty imminent at this point, according to a couple of sources, that Jack Buller will request a trade to Collingwood. And as I've said over the last few weeks or so, I just think that Sydney can't do much about this. He's not going to be in their best 23 next year when McLean, Amati, and McDonald are all fit. And that's not to say if there's another forward that is coming in for Sydney, that he's just going to get pushed back further in the pecking order. So I think that Jack Buller is making the right decision here on a potential trade. This was also brought up on Gettable recently.
I'm contracted at Sydney, but has the interest from Collingwood yet to request a trade? trade. You had to request a trade from the Swans, though. This is an interesting one in the sense that the Pies, I think, they clearly want to get younger at both ends of the field.
Yet to, but will. He's going to request a trade, is my expectation, to Collingwood. From Sydney, has a 2-year offer on the table there, has met with them in recent days. Charlie Gardner is the link there, having been at the Swans, now at the Pies. I think it also points to the fact that we're about to get to Brody Myercheck. Is he out the door and is he the replacement?
Yeah.
Now, you heard there as well that Brody Myercheck could be a swap for Jack Buller at the Swans. Obviously, Myercheck's worth a little bit more, so the Swans would have to give up, or maybe probably another pick or two to get Brody Myercheck the other way. But it does seem that Melbourne are probably in the box seat to get Brody Myercheck, according to Mitch Cleary. So we may actually hear some news regarding Brody Myercheck in the next couple of days. And we have heard in recent weeks that North Melbourne are coming hard for Brody as well. I think it was a 3-year deal for him. So definitely want to keep an eye out on. I would be a bit surprised if he did leave Collingwood. I've always felt that he would re-sign with the Pies, but I'd be interested to see what Collingwood fans think about Brody Myercheck and if they should let him go or if they should go really hard for him to keep him at the club. I'd really like to hear you guys' thoughts. But sticking with the Demons, Max Heath seems all but certain at this point to be joining the Demons from St Kilda, has been stuck behind Rowan Marshall for a lot of his career so far. Did get into the team for the first time this year in the AFL level, but it seems at this point that he's ready to move on and join the Melbourne. Of course, Demons actually recently delisted Tom Fullerton, who was supposed to be that second fiddle to Max Gawn, but never really worked out. And it seems like Max Heath is the guy they want to go with moving forward. He's only 22 years of age as well, so definitely someone who can work in the VFL system for a couple more years before Max Gawn does retire, or even just maybe move himself forward to prolong his career. But definitely something for Demons fans. I think this is actually a good move for them. Now, Judd McVie has been really stuck on this decision throughout the entire year. It's been between staying at Melbourne and moving to Fremantle, and it does seem that Freo are going even harder now for Judd McVie. A great decision for Fremantle to try and just bolster their defence that's been very good throughout the last couple of years, but a lot of people would say that premierships are won by defences, and Freo are trying to shore that up with Judd McVie's signature, but definitely one to keep an eye out on. He hasn't made a decision, hasn't really made an indicator of where he wants to be next year, so definitely 50-50 at this stage. After that, another Demons defender looks like he could be moving elsewhere. This is Stephen May. It seems that he is reportedly open to a move as long as it is a multi-year contract. Now, he's been linked to the Bulldogs and North Melbourne along with Collingwood. All three of these teams need defensive reinforcements. The earlier teams in North Melbourne and the Dogs have also been linked to Tyler Young, who is a Richmond defender. Dogs have been a little bit more, I'd say they're probably third seed to get him at this stage. They've been a little bit in and out, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Dogs were able to secure his signature. It depends on money and success, of course, but Collingwood with the success factor, North Melbourne with the money factor, and then the Dogs probably sit somewhere in between, but I still think they're probably third seed in getting him. Now, Changwath Jaff seems all but certain at this point that at the conclusion of the Hawthorn season now that he is going to be joining Carlton next year. This is according to Sam McClure, so huge grain of salt, of course, but I think that he probably does move at this point. With Hawthorn having to give up a lot for a couple of players this off-season, especially Zach Merritt, I wouldn't be too surprised if Jaff does move on, and he definitely would have that secured spot at Carlton's best 23 next year, probably off that half-back line, which would be really exciting for the Blues. Now, another player that has been linked to Carlton in previous months is Ned Reeves, but good signs here for Hawthorn. It does seem that he is expected to sign a longer-term contract with the club to stay a few more years. He has been linked to Collingwood as well, and I was a bit surprised by this. I thought he would probably leave, but he wants to try and fight for his spot against Lloyd Meek at the Hawks. Now, moving to a couple of St Kilda players, at this moment in time, it does seem that Cal Wilkie is back in the news cycle regarding trade. It's reporting from Sam Edmund that Luke Beveridge did discuss a prospect of him moving to the Dogs next year. Now, it hasn't been really talked about regarding if he was interested in this sort of move, so I'm taking this one with I'd say it's a very slight chance that he leaves St Kilda. I still think he's a pretty loyal guy, stay at St Kilda long term. This obviously has been brought up because Wilkie has been a little bit disillusioned, which is a great word I love in the trade period, with where St Kilda's priorities are. Of course, wanting to bring in a lot of players this year, but maybe not taking care enough of their backyard. So Cal Wilkie's probably been a little bit weary about where his spot lies. Probably wants a little bit more on his contract, though. He's such an important player. Probably deserves a little bit more cash in my eyes. Now, Jack Steele as well has been linked with a couple of clubs throughout the year. He has been pretty adamant, though, that he is not going to leave St Kilda, and the Saints have been pretty adamant on that as well. However, there has been reports from Sam McClure, of course, that have speculated that he would be very surprised if Jack Steele was at the Saints. In fact, he does say that he hasn't heard much about Jack Steele, but he doesn't see him at the Saints next season. So he does link that Essendon could be a potential team to look at him, but I still think he will stay at St Kilda. I'd be very surprised if he was to leave the Saints as the captain. However, being a captain of the club doesn't mean you're not going to move. Moving on to the next player in Jai Simpkin. Now, Xander Maguire brought this up first of all, broke the news on 7 AFL, saying that Simpkin has discussed his frustrations with being played out of position at the Roos, of course playing a lot more half forward and wing rather than playing in the guts. He does have a 4-year deal still at North Melbourne, is believed to be worth around an average of $1 million a year, so clubs will have to make a significant sacrifice to get him to the club. However, the Jai Simpkin management has started to sound out a couple of clubs to gauge his interest on wanting to move, and Harry Sheasel, who would probably be their next captain at this point, did come out on SEN with his thoughts saying Jai Simpkin hasn't requested a trade, he's just exploring his options, seeing if there's anything out there for him. So I don't think that's as great to see from a captain of a club. Personally, I think the Adelaide Crows should look at him. They need more A-grade midfielders, and I think that Simpkin can be an A-grade midfielder. He's shown glimpses of it in his career, but I think consistency would be great for him, and the Crows desperately need someone who, 1, who's experienced, 2, who can lead, and 3, who's an A-grade midfielder. And I think Jai Simpkin ticks off all of those on this list. Now, he hasn't been officially linked to the Crows at this stage, but the Crows are headhunting a couple of players and A-grade players. We heard Zach Merritt, that's obviously off the table. Christian Petrarca could be, but Jai Simpkin, I think, is their best chance. So I think the Adelaide should desperately be trying to get him to the club if Simpkin's keen to move. And honestly, I think this would be an okay move for North Melbourne. The ball is in their court. They can make the Crows pay huge overs, but they also need some help down in defence. North Melbourne, with maybe a Jordan Butts could be a player that they could be linked in the deal. He's still contracted, but could be potentially on the move. And there's obviously a couple of other Adelaide players that North Melbourne could use on their list as well. So definitely one to keep a watch. And finally, a couple of news topics on Essendon. First of all, Jaden Laverde has had a medical with GWS and has recently been announced that he has been delisted from Essendon. So no trade will really need to be required here. He can be picked up as a delisted free agent or a rookie at the end of the season. So the Giants, we heard about Robbie Fox a moment ago. Jaden Laverde could potentially come in for free. Great defensive stocks that are building at the Giants. Some experience that can be played in the VFL throughout the year and just be used as emergencies. Now, this was brought up on Footy Classified regarding what the Bombers need to ask for if Zach Merritt does leave. The untouchables at the Hawks are Will Day, Josh Weddle, Jai Newcomb, and James Sicily. But there are a couple of players available that they could keep their eye on. Maybe not so much available, that may be the wrong word, but someone who they can pry out of the club. So he's listed Nick Watson, Dylan Moore. I don't think that's really going to happen. Dylan Moore, I think, recently re-signed as well. So I think you cross them out. Connor McDonald, Lloyd Meek, Josh Ward. Could be. I don't really think Lloyd Meek would leave, though. He's kind of pretty much put it out there that he wants to stay. Recently signed an extension, so maybe not so much him. Cal Shadir and Cam McKenzie are interesting ones. Cal Shadir was pushed out of the team later in the year in this final series. He's probably the 4th choice tall forward. However, Jack Gunston, even though he had a career best year this year, he does have to retire eventually. So Hawthorn, I don't think, would let Cal Shadir go. Cam McKenzie, on the other hand, has been linked to St Kilda. Potentially Essendon could get involved. And also Henry Huswaite has been linked to Essendon. So maybe Cam McKenzie, Henry Huswaite could move to Hawthorn, maybe a couple of picks as well. And then Zach Merritt gets his move to Hawthorn, which he desperately wants. Now, another post was made regarding the Eagles' compensation / players' worth of the West Coast players potentially leaving. So free agency compensation to Brisbane for Oscar Allen seems to be pick 2. So that's great for the Eagles. They need to get that and secure that. So pick 1 and pick 2 at this draft. Even though people are saying it's not the best draft, the first couple of picks seem pretty good. So I think that West Coast need to just keep the draft picks. They've got to stop trading for players in my eyes. Yes, maybe get Brendan Starkovich. That's not bad. But at this point, they need to draft young talent, and they are so scared of doing it seems. But they just have to do it. They have to bite the bullet, just say, look, we're going to be at the bottom for a couple of years. That they had a terrible season. So just go for it, in my eyes. Now, this account of Golden Wing says that Liam Ryan's worth a future second rounder if he does get to St Kilda. I think that's a bit overs in my eyes. I think that a 3rd round pick for Liam Ryan is more than enough considering the output that he's put out the last couple of years and the injury woes he's had. So that's just my thoughts, but maybe a future second if they get lucky. And Campbell Chesser, of course, has requested a trade to Carlton over the last couple of weeks. Pick 34 for a guy who was in the first round of the draft. Maybe a little bit overs, but I think they're going to probably have to pay a little bit more here, Carlton, because Chesser is still contracted till next year. And finally, according to Cal Toomey, Carlton are willing to put a first round pick on their table. So, of course, last year they jumped up the draft to try and get Jagger Smith, which, of course, worked out well. They got him. He's a really high talent. Unfortunately, he did get injured, but I think he's still going to be a great prospect for the Blues moving forward. However, they did say at the moment that their compensation for Tom De Koning is likely going to be pick 10. So pick 10 is on the table at this stage if they want to bring in some high talent. Maybe behind the scenes, they are looking at a couple of good players, the Blues. Haven't really been linked to a lot of high-profile players at this stage, but if they could get someone big, that pick 10 could be in play. And I think it's going to be an aggressive off-season for Carlton. Definitely a team that has to be watched throughout this off-season. But guys, that is pretty much all the rumours and trade news we had in this video. Make sure to let me know down below your ideal trade targets for your team this off-season. Of course, make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. But for now, catch us all in the next one.